Hello and welcome back to our Curus Plays Arma 3 Laws of War DLC. So, looks like our drone with our demining toolkit is finally here. Go ahead and take that.
Toolkit's here. See you later, little buddy.
What's that?
Nothing, just talking to myself.
Okay, little buddy. Sure thing.
Hey, how are you getting on?
Not bad, not bad. Our gear's finally arrived from dispatch. I can start deactivating mines and leftover ordnance now.
Oh, right. And do you do that by hand?
Sure do. Crawl up close, identify it, and then just, disarm the thing.
I'm sure it's more involved than that.
Yeah, well, I may have skipped the part where, it can explode.
I like that little bit of gallows humor, because that's kind of a real thing in, most military circles and veteran circles. Even like firefighter, EMS, police circles as well.
The siege of the town? My notes suggest it lasted for 2 weeks. How could that be?
Divine intervention.
Pardon me?
No, just the weather. Got in their way. Weeks of thick cloud cover blanketed the town.
I'm still not sure I follow.
It prevented the army from calling in Cass. Soon as that cleared, though, well, you know about the cluster strike.
Yep. Even military planes and helicopters don't like flying in inclement weather. So, especially if the enemy sets up a strong point like the guerrillas here did, and they're able to stop armor coming up the road with mines, keep the infantry from being able to suppress enough to breach the minefield. Yeah, I could see how that could last for quite a bit. So let's go ahead and get up to this mine. We'll go ahead and disarm it. Got to approach slowly, get enough to see this little X, and
Gotcha.
spacebar will take it down. Anti-CSAT sign.
I've been meaning to ask, after NATO pulled out, when CSAT stepped in, how did that affect your work?
Day to day? I mean, COINOP stepped up, but honestly, things are already sliding that way, even with NATO at the helm. For the most part, CSAT were mindful of our activities. Brutal, no doubt, but at least clinical. Whole thing felt like one big PR exercise for them.
We'll clear out the mines as we make our way through these reminiscences.
Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't IDAP and NATO share some common goals? The training, for example. The laws of armed conflict?
Sorta. It's a tough one, actually. It was important we didn't overstep the mark.
You had to be impartial.
Precisely. In a conflict, we have to remain neutral, a partner to all parties, even those that, personally, we may object to.
Yep, that's like part of the quandary of even the International Red Cross. I believe most of the proceeds from this DLC went to the International Red Cross, actually. Because a lot of people may not want them to remain impartial. Because for them to be able to do what it is they do, ensure communications with prisoners, ensure prisoners of war are getting the proper, proper treatment, that sort of thing. They have to maintain, they have to be impartial. So, like, if a representative of the International Red Cross visits an American POW, like, they're not allowed to tell, like, the American government where that POW is, even if the host party of the POW wasn't hiding it from the Red Cross. So, and a lot of people really don't like that.
You mentioned that IDAP worked with a local mechanic. How did that come about?
Hollywood might call it serendipity, but I don't know. He just saved our ass one time, and then another, and so the story goes. There wasn't much special about his setup, but guy knew the difference between a crankshaft and a tire iron.
He was good at what he did then.
There wasn't much he couldn't fix. Never asked for a receipt, though, if you know what I mean.
So it turns out, like, these two brothers whose story we're ultimately following, you know, it turns out they were stand-up guys. They were helping where people needed help. Our next one's a little bit out there. Yep, we want to go this way. I'll go ahead and speed up time while we make our way out here. Man, what a walk. Going way off the beaten path now. But that's one of the joys of Arma, is that you can do that.
I'm just catching a little downtime at the castle. Great views up here, you know?
No problem. Maybe you've got time to chat.
Sure, welcome break, actually.
Do you know who built it?
The castle? Not exactly. Thing was built sometime around the end of the 9th century. Arabian warlords. But I mean, they only occupied a much older site. It was a Phoenician fortress before that. You know, during the first of the Punic Wars, the Romans laid siege to it 6 long years.
That's some time. Did they capture it?
In a way. The defenders wound up ceding it to Rome, some later treaty. And then, well, it gets even more complicated.
I must say you're quite the historian, Nathan.
Who, me? No, I'm just a parrot. My wife, she sends me all these books, teaches history back home. A professor, actually.
There's some nice little history here. It's like I've said before, Altis and Stratis are based off of real islands over in Greece. Actually, the developers of Arma had an issue while they were developing it because they sent some of their photographers to these islands to take photos for reference. And, well, they were taking photos of military installations on Greece, so the Greek government arrested them for spying, actually. I mean, eventually they did get released and things got cleared up, but, you know, it was one of those big things that happened during the development of Arma 3, actually. Let's see. Yep, there's what I'm looking for.
I often read articles about war and video games, the digital battlefield and such. What's your view?
My view? Usually flat on my belly, few inches away from high explosives. I'm just messing with you, Kate. That's the reality these days. In many ways it's become so, I don't know, sanitized. A few pixels on a screen, a drone in the air, and a guy sitting somewhere on the other side of the world, ready to click a button.
So this is kind of like an interesting take from Bohemia's point of view, because, you know, they make money on games like, say, you know, the Arma series, which is basically, you know, war simulations, and war simulations is what a service that their parent company provides to militaries around the world. I mean, take on helicopters, take on Mars. These are other Bohemia Interactive games. Give me just a second. Sorry for the interruption there. So like, their, you know, their influence in the wargaming scene, and then, you know, how, you know, what with drone warfare becoming a very, very common thing nowadays, especially in the war in Ukraine. Like, you know, for some people, real war is, you know, controlling a drone from halfway around the world, clicking a button and dropping a bomb, and, you know, people die on the other end. And, you know, it's there's long been, like, I've had this long-standing belief that human beings can tell the difference between simulated gore and real pain and suffering. There's a Jim Sterling video, like, many years back, where he never had to get any permission to show, like, any of the extreme video game violence on his channel, but there is footage out there of a real U.S. politician, you know, shooting himself in the head, and he had to get so much permission to even put that in the video, because he's making a point that we can tell the difference. And whereas I don't really flinch on violence in video games, even much gorier violence than is portrayed in Arma, but, like, that video makes me sick, and, like, real world violence actually makes me feel ill for myself on a level. Whenever I see an injury on another person, I empathize with them enough to imagine that injury on myself. And so, like, I'm of two minds when it comes to, you know, I mean, it is really hard to, like, put, like, degrees on things, but, you know, when, like, drone operators are, you know, claiming PTSD and that sort of thing, like, my gut reaction is to say, no, man, what you saw was, like, no different in a video game. But, like, then I think to myself, like, to, like, that footage that we know the difference between real world violence and imaginary video game or Hollywood violence, that, you know, they got a point. They got a point. They have a foot to stand on. It's just as valid as anybody else's. So, to raise that question of video game, I feel like Bohemia is kind of, like, dodging the issue a bit, but to raise the question is a major step forward. You know, that in an increasingly automated war setting, you know, how should we look at other interactive modes of violence versus, you know, what's experienced by a drone pilot, and what kind of psychological effects does that have on people. I think that even though I stand on the side of, I don't really think video games affect people's capacity for violence. You know, that's where I firmly stand, because every study has shown that it doesn't. I think that as especially drone warfare continues to, you know, continues to grow and be more prevalent, I think that it is really worth, like, continuing to look into, you know, studies like these, so that maybe, you know, because in the future there are going to be more drone operators in militaries, and if we could find some way even to help spare them some of the psychological effects of their work, especially if they have like combat drones where they're dropping bombs and that sort of thing, guiding them in with laser designators from the drones. Like, they basically have to watch the explosion. In the event of like trying to help those people in the future, I think those questions are really important to continue to ask, and to keep doing studies on the subject, to keep up with it as it evolves, in an effort to, you know, reduce some sort of human suffering in the future.
If there's one thing I remember about a Lexus, it was the guy's pickup truck. Thing made a hell of a racket.
And his brother, wasn't he a mechanic? Why wouldn't he fix it?
Oh, believe me, he tried. But that was a Lexus. Stubborn as a mule.
Look to see if there's any more little things to take a look at. Alright. Let's just clear out the rest of these mines and UXOs. Then we'll get on with the campaign. Come on. The double clickiness of my mouse, it's a bit of an issue. Just trying to shift left click to put down a waypoint, but like when you double click on the map, it puts a marker. Alright, so that should be all of the UXOs. Oh, finally, we don't have to hear we've got a UXO on a wall here.
Well, you were one sneaky little bastard. Now, what were you hiding upstairs?
Alright. This is going to be our next episode up here. So anyways, thank you for watching. This is Arcturus, signing off.